The interviewee this evening for you is Ian Maclellan, well known throughout the piping world, solo piper, pipe major, judge and various other things, who has, I'm quite sure, interesting views in all matters relating to piping and other matters as well, if we get round to it. So, without any further ado, I'm going to ask Ian a question. Ian, could you start the ball rolling, please, by telling us about your early life in piping? When did it commence? Who's your first teacher, and what kind of guy was he? Who did he learn from? That sort of stuff.
It all really started probably about 1946 when I was down in a farm in a place called Shandon, down past Helensburgh, where we were evacuated to after the Clydebank Blitz. And my father had worked in the Blackburn Aircraft Company at that time in Dumbarton, and he had a colleague called Alec Ibell, who was maybe not well known to everybody, but well known to the piping fraternity as a very good teacher. So he volunteered one day to cycle from Whiteinch in Glasgow down to the farm at Shandon, and he brought with him a practice chanter and a Logan's tutor book.
Good.
And that was me on the road. And the following year we moved back to Clydebank, where we were allocated a new house, and from there on in I used to go to Alec Ibell's house every Thursday for a lesson on the practice chanter. And after about a year with him, I was on the pipes, and eventually...
What age would you be then, Ian?
Well, I started
Roughly.
actually, 1946 I started, I was 9.
Okay.
9 years of age. And we come back the following year, 47, so I was 10 then, and I went to Alec Ibell for about 2 years, and he persuaded me to join the 214 Boys Brigade, which was based in Whiteinch, and the pipe major at that time was Alec McIver. And I said, aye, okay, I'll join the 214, and before I knew it, I was in the 214 pipe band and going and playing in all these competitions.
Aye.
Week in, week out during the summer months, and thoroughly enjoying it.
Other personalities in that BB pipe band are well known in the piping world. Just name a few names for us.
The other tutor that was there was a guy called Joe King. Quite a few people know him, because Joe was a guy that really taught you how to set up your instrument, how to blow your instrument, and that was his main job, was all about tone. But other colleagues I had that were in the 214 at that time was Joe Noble, who's well known, drummer. George Seymour, who at that time was the bass drummer, and George eventually became the drum major in the police band. Alistair Ross, he wasn't there at the same time as me, but Alistair was just not long after me. Alec Connell, who was a leading drummer in the police band. Yeah. John Finlay, who was well-known piper in the Muirheads with Bob Hardy. Yep. But there was Robert Wallace himself, who was the principal at the College of Piping, but as you probably understand, Robert was a wee bit after my time.
Oh, but Stirling McMurtry, was he there?
Aye, well, Stirling was there at that time as well. Aye. Stirling was...
So that's quite a crowd, eh?
There was quite a few guys, and quite a lot of other guys as well who weren't involved with the police band right enough, but they were involved there with other Grade 1 bands.
What standard of piping were you encouraged to achieve in the BB pipe band at that time?
Well, insofar as the basics was concerned, you were really encouraged to make sure that your technique was as good as you could actually get it. Yeah. You know, and musical wise, Alec McIver would explain all the phrasing to you, and how to phrase the tunes and how to get the most out of the tunes. And as I said already, Joe King, he was a guy that worked on tone and showed you how to read your instrument.
And did you get an early understanding of how to play a 6/8, for instance, and that band, did that come later on?
Oh no, these are the kind of things that you were encouraged to.
Yeah, I
learn.
picked it up from you sometime many years ago that I thought that's where you'd learned that. Your 2/4s and strathspades and that sort of thing. Were you picking up that?
When you were picking up that theme all along,
which was obviously strengthened later on.
Well, this is it, you know. If you're learning at that age, it does you good as you progress into the piping scene, because you've had a good foundation right from the word go.
Yeah, especially blowing instruments is terribly important.
Oh well, that was a major factor, and as you know, that the 214 had a great record. I mean, way back then, during my own term with them, which was from 1949 through to 1955, and during that time they won the World's Juvenile Championship 3 times.
My goodness.
And at the British Championship in Renfrew in 1955, they actually beat the 402, which eventually became the 277, which was Johnny Weatherson's band. They beat them in the Grade 2 to win the Grade 2 British Championship as a juvenile band.
That's amazing, that, isn't
and
it?
that was way back in 1955.
My goodness. And what chanters do you remember? What kind of pipes they were playing at that time?
At that time, I played the same pipes that I've still got, which was the Macrae's. And we all played hardy chanters.
Right.
I know initially when I joined the 214, it was like Heinz's 57 different varieties, because they all played different chanters. But as time went on and the band was progressing, Alec McIver decided that it would be best if we all had hardy chanters.
Matching chanters.
And the Boys Brigade, I don't know where they got the money from. I think the parents actually put a bit of money into it, and we got a set of hardy chanters.
And so that's the chanters, and your Macrae pipes. Was it cocoswood?
There's cocoswood.
I seem to remember that. That's unusual too, isn't it?
It is unusual.
But they never get wet with you, the cocoswood.
No, I never have. I was fortunate enough. I wasn't really a wet blower, and I never really had problems an awful lot with dampness in the drones and things like that.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about the Macrae drones, they actually belonged to Joe King, and he had bought them off a guy called Willie Francie, who I'd never met, but as far as I'm led to believe, they were actually made in 1928, the drones. And Willie Francie actually bought them brand new. And
where were they made?
By Duncan Macrae.
Where
Granger and Campbell's old original workshop was in Ardelsey.
So they were the forerunners.
They were the forerunners of Granger and Campbell.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Willie Gray, who was the pipe major the Glasgow Police way back in the 20s and 30s, he had a lot of input into Macrae bagpipes.
Okay.
By the design of them.
And of course, for today's listener, you've got to impress upon them that all the reeds were cane, and it was a sheepskin bag, and none of this plastic stuff.
There was no synthetic stuff in the days. It was the raw material, as they say.
Can you remember what you used for seasoning at that time?
Well, I can remember. I can remember that Alec Ibel, when he first taught us how to look after the pipes and season the bag, it was the white of an egg and brown sugar.
There you are.
Mixed up, heated and mixed up, and that went into the bag. And that seasoned the instrument. But not long after that, we went on to Robertson seasoning.
Okay.
Which is
the forerunner
of which is the airtight seasoning today.
Aye.
And that would be back probably in the middle 50s when we went on to the Robertson
So it's
seasoning.
a proprietary seasoning.
It was a proprietary seasoning from that time.
Excellent. So that really covers your time in the BB.
Aye.
So moving on from that, when did you'd obviously leave the BB when you were a certain age, and was it 18 or something?
I was 18.
And you moved on to the Renfrew Pipe Band. And was Tommy Anderson the pipe major when you joined at that time, or was it somebody else?
No, when I joined the Renfrew at the end of 1955, the pipe major was a guy called Tommy Shearer. And he had just taken over from Donald Murray, who you probably remember eventually became pipe major for the Red Hackle.
He did.
Aye.
And I was in the Hackle with him.
Aye.
He was a pipe major.
Aye.
Right.
Well, the reason that Donald designed was he was a marine engineer, Donald, and he was away in the ships quite a lot. I think he was a what they called a guarantee engineer. He went with the ship in its trials and things like that. So he couldn't come to the practices as often as he would like.
Couldn't guarantee being at the band.
That's a good one, Alan. You couldn't guarantee him being at the practice. I reckon. So Donald decided at the AGM at the end of 1955, just as I was joining the Renfrew, he put in his resignation. And I think a lot of people at that time actually thought that Joe King would have taken over the band, because Joe had been looking after the band for that season, and they had actually done quite well under Joe's tenure. And but Joe didn't want to be the pipe major, so they offered it to Tommy Shearer, who had just come out the Argyles at that time. He'd just come out the army, and Tommy took up the mantle, and he was there for 2 years while I was there, and he did a really good job with the band. But the season 56 and 57, the band was second in the world 2 years in the trot. And they also won the European Pipe Band Championship 2 years in the trot under Tommy, and a lot of other prizes for by. But Tommy decided that he wanted to emigrate to America. And at the end of his second season as pipe major, he resigned, and him and his wife and the family, they emigrated to America, and Jimmy Healy took over.
Aye.
And just shortly after Jimmy Healy took over, I went away to the army.
Maybe a good move.
I think it was a good move, actually. So I went to the army in 1958.
Was that the National Service?
Aye. And
what did you work at before you went into the army?
I was actually a toolmaker to trade.
Okay.
Aye. A toolmaker in a company called D&J Tullis, which was in Clydebank.
But you still had to do your National Service?
Oh, aye. Well,
you had to wait until your apprenticeship was finished, was it?
My apprenticeship finished on the April of 1958, and the June I was sent for.
It didn't hang about,
by
did
Her
it?
Majesty.
So, what regiment did you go to then?
I went to the Argyles, actually. In fact, I asked if I could go to the Argyles, because when Tommy Shearer was the pipe major at the Renfrew, he knew that eventually I was going to be going to the army. And he says, if you go to the army, go to the Argyles, he says, because Andrew Keithley is the pipe major, he says, and you'll learn lots from him. And he was true to his word. I did learn a lot from him.
Right.
He was an excellent teacher and a first-class pipe major.
That's terrific. And so that was 2 years National Service?
I did 3 years.
3?
Aye.
Did you go abroad or anything?
Aye, well, the regiment, after I did my basic training, which was 10 weeks at Stirling Castle, I then went to Cyprus.
Okay.
And the emergency was on there at the time, and we were still struggling with General Grievous and his EOCA terrorists in the days out there. But after about 6 months, they had signed a truce and things were back to normal. So but I was there for a year, and then we come back from there and then went to Germany. And during the time we were in Germany, we had a lot of great trips.
You enjoyed that, eh?
We went to New York with a British military tattoo and appeared in Madison Square Garden. And then the following year we went to Moscow in Russia. Now this is 1960 we're talking about.
Aye.
Still the Cold War and all that kind of thing.
So how did you get there? Airplane, I take it?
Aye, we flew from Germany
Uh-huh.
to Moscow, and we were there for 3 weeks. The reason we were there, there was a big British trade fair on there, which lasted for 3 weeks, and the Argyll's pipe band and the military band, which is just it's a brass band, literally.
Yeah.
The two bands went over there for 3 weeks to appear every day in this British trade fair, entertaining the Russians.
Aye.
It was a good trip. It was really very interesting
Aye.
to see how the...
So it was America and Russia with the British Army, eh?
well, that was just a couple of the trips, right enough.
And
Various places in Europe during the same period. But it's different days then in the army than what it is now.
what kind of solo piping were you doing at that point? It's still like music. You never tackled Pibroch.
Well, I did play Pibroch.
Right, okay.
When I was in the army under Andy Keithley, in fact, he was really wanting me to go in my pipe majors course at the end of the 3 years sort of thing. And he says, well, if you go in your pipe majors course, he says, you're going to have to learn Pibroch. He started me on Pibroch, and I think I had about 7 or 8 tunes from him.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in the army, I competed in 2 or 3 army competitions, which were open to other army regiments as well, Highland regiments.
Yeah.
And I managed to get a couple of prizes in the Pibroch competition. In fact, I think the highest I got was second.
Well, there you are.
Right, second in playing the Lament for the Only Son. I can always remember it.
That's my favourite tune.
Was it?
Aye.
Played that.
That's funny.
But he was trying to persuade me to stay on in the army, and in the other year I was getting Angus MacDonald, who was pipe major of the City of Glasgow Police.
Right.
And he was in the other year, and he was saying, no, come out and join the police. He says, I've got a position for you in the police service.
Okay.
So eventually, after 3 years were up, I came out of the army, and I went back to being a toolmaker again, and rejoined the Renfrew band, who by this time was under the pipe majorship of Tommy Anderson.
Aye, famous Tommy.
And Tommy said, when I came back, Tommy said, would you fancy being the pipe sergeant?
Uh-huh.
In fact, well, it says, well, Jimmy Dow, who was a very good friend of mine actually, Jimmy was the pipe sergeant, and I'm saying, well, I don't want to take Jimmy's a pipe sergeant. He's getting Jimmy says, I don't want it, you take it, he says. So I said, okay, I'll be a pipe sergeant. So I had a very good year. But Tommy knew that at the end of that year I was going to be joining the police anyway. And that was that. But we had actually quite a successful year. In fact, we were third, I think, in the world that year in Belfast.
We were second. I was playing with Red Hackle.
Oh yeah?
Aye.
Because that was the year we Johnny's band won it.
That's right, in 277 they won it. And I was along with McFadgen and Norrie Gillis and Dougie, wee Dougie, I forget his name, Granger Campbell, from Isla.
Ferguson.
Aye. And Andy Wright was a pipe sergeant and all this. There was a lot of good bands, a lot of good playing going on at that time.
There was actually.
So you get third then?
We got third then.
There you go.
So, I think the Edinburgh Police were a wee bit peeved. I think they were fourth or something.
Nobody ever heard the shots at that time, did they?
Well, I think they were going through a kind of transitional period because I think John had given up, I think. Well, no, I'll tell you what happened. That was the time of when the drummers all went away. Remember the drummers all left him and went to Invergordon?
Aye, correct. And he couldn't compete.
He couldn't compete because he didn't have any drum. He didn't have a drum corps.
Aye, there you are. And so that was yourself with a year with Tommy Anderson, and you obviously liked the way that he played the tunes, because later on in the police band, when you had the police band, you played Tommy's tunes, Young McGregor.
And we played a lot of the tunes, like Hugh Kennedy and things like that.
Hugh Kennedy, and you played the settings that you played at Renfrew at that time, was that correct?
Aye, exact same settings.
That's what I'm saying, aye. So obviously it had some effect there.
Well, the thing was that...
did you pick up anything from Tommy, or did you feel that you had...
well, I think
information
it's
for our
like
sources.
everything and else when you're under different people. I think you kind of take in the things that you like that they do,
Yes.
and you try and mould it into your own way of doing things.
Aye,
But
that's right.
I had a lot of respect for Tommy Anderson. I thought the guy was he was great at setting up a band, and he was great in encouraging people to
He made
play.
the best of available resources.
You're right, he did. That was one thing about him.
I thought that was his outstanding feature. You know, you get a rubbish piper in and just plink him somewhere in the middle of the band.
Aye.
Don't you play grace notes, son? Just to blow the instrument, you know.
As long as Tommy was interested in, as long as you can blow a tone, son, you're in my band.
That's it, that's it. Aye. But he's got to be admired that he used the resources instead of saying,
I think,
no good
you know,
enough.
when you think about it, you know, Tommy, over the years, worked with a few different bands.
Aye,
And they all came up to the top.
they did.
They all did. Aye. Because the guy just had the knack.
Good manager.
Aye. Good man management as well.
Aye. Oh, aye, terrific. I played in his band for a wee while also, just roughly a year or two. Anyway, that was the Renfrew Pipe Band. And then you joined the police.
Joined the police October 1962.
My goodness.
And I was in the job a week, and I was doing it at the first band practice.
Aye.
I can always remember
Angus
it.
MacDonald, the pipe major.
Aye, Angus MacDonald, he was the pipe major then.
Hashish.
Sheesh, aye. I don't remember, I went to Oxford Street. You know how you get your basic training the first week you're at Oxford Street. And then the Friday, after lunch, they're all Sergeant Riley, and he had us out there in this parade square doing I could see this guy coming out the door, and he's over to Sergeant Riley, he's whispering in his ear, and the next thing he says, "Is there a Maclellan here?" And I'm going, "Sir, that's me." He says, "You have to report to the pipe major and Govan Police Office right away."
First week.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm thinking, they're all looking at me, saying, "Who the hell is this guy?"
Aye.
So that was me. Down there and saw Angus, and the next minute I go, was a pile of music, learn that.
But Angus MacDonald did that. I was only a fortnight in the police and he was flinging music at me as well. And like yourself, you probably compete with the band, even although you were a probationer.
Oh, aye.
You're in the police, and that's
you
in the band, and you had to go to band practice, and your shift inspector would complain like.
Oh, no. Well, the thing was,
you know.
I was quite lucky because Angus MacDonald was my shift inspector.
Oh, well. Oh, no, I'd get jipped over in the Marine.
Aye, you would do,
Oh, a guy didn't like the band, and it's getting. I was a meat and a sandwich, you know.
Oh, you would. I think that happened to quite a lot of guys, actually.
Aye.
Because
But so that was you under Angus MacDonald, and you started with the band, and do you want to tell the folks how successful Angus was in 65, 66?
I actually did. I'm trying to think now. Well, I was 60. Well, my first season with them would be 1963, and they were always there or thereabouts, but never actually won any of the majors since 63. And then I think the following year, 64, the only major we won, I think, was Cowell.
Okay.
We won Cowell that year. We were always kind of chapping at the door in the world, so always maybe third or fourth or something like that, maybe fifth. And then the following year, 65, we won the Scottish that year. And then the following year we were second to the Muirheads at the Worlds.
I think
that was Inverness, I think, if I remember
we got
right.
beat by a tenth of a point.
Aye.
That's what it was. It was first equal, but they won it in the pipe and preference, a tenth of a point or something like that.
Aye.
And because that was Angus MacDonald's last year as pipe
It was,
major.
aye.
And I think we got second the following year to Muirheads under Big Ronnie, but
did.
it was a half a point or something like that.
That was at
a
Oban.
quarter
That was at
point.
Oban that
Aye.
year, the following year, 67.
Yeah, yeah.
Aye.
Was that the first year of the medley competition, or was it was at Aberdeen that come in, the new medley competition? I think it was round about that time, because
Nah,
remember playing the banjo breakdown or something, you know.
Oban was a March to Spainville, because I remember that.
Aye.
And the following year, 68, I think, was it 68? No, Grangemouth.
Might have been right enough.
I think the following year was in Grangemouth, and I think that was the kind of introduction of the medleys around about that time.
Aye. So that's how far back we go to medleys. Some folk think it's a relatively modern
it's no relatively new, but I think it's. I mean, the medleys, the format of the medley has changed quite a lot over the years, you know, because way back when it started, it was just
a collection of tunes.
Just a collection. Well, it was really just a collection of tunes. You would look through the book. Where can get with two parties to space, two parties reels, and all this kind of stuff, and hornpipes and jigs and a slow air and things like that. You know, it was. Although it was a medley as such, there's nothing compared to what they do nowadays.
Ian, we're talking about the city of Glasgow Police Pipe Band. In the 60s, the late 60s, we were starting to go on, well, just the tail end of Angus MacDonald. And it occurred to me we should mention something about chanters. You just talk about chanters for a second or two.
Initially, when I joined the police band, they were playing the Hardy chanters at that time. But around about 1964, Angus decided that he wanted to play the Granger and Campbell chanters, and I can remember when we got them initially, we were actually getting quite a good sound out of them. Mm-hmm. But I think we played one set. I heard Grangers for about a year, and then he decided that he wanted to try a new set of Grangers, but the new set I didn't think were as good as the original ones we were playing, and I don't think the sound was just as good collectively. And then, as you know, Angus gave up. He retired from pipe major job in 1966, and immediately Ronald replaced the Grangers with new Hardys.
Okay.
And we played the Hardy chanter right up until Ronnie retired. Now, just prior to Ronnie retiring, in fact, 1971, the World Championship was in Lanark that year, and Tommy Anderson at that time was pipe major of St Patrick's Band of Dunnockmore from Northern Ireland.
There you are.
And I heard them tuning up, and the first thing that caught my ear was the sound. I said, oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Aye. So I'm away over there, and I'm talking to Tommy, and I'm saying, what kind of chanters is that you're playing, Tommy? And they were wooden Warnock chanters. Uh-huh. Now, this was the chanters that Andrew Warnock made.
Right.
And they were a cracking sound. In fact, they get second in piping that day. Mm-hmm. And that winter, Tommy had me over in Northern Ireland at Andrew Warnock's workshop, and working away with these Warnock chanters.
Okay.
And I knew that Ronnie was going to be retiring, and he officially retired in January 72. But in the meantime, I had got a hold of a set of these chanters from Andrew Warnock, and I'd put them in the band. Mm-hmm. I mean, Ronnie knew about it, because he wasn't going behind his back.
Aye.
And we actually did a New Year show playing these Warnock chanters. Mm-hmm. And it was one of these pre-recorded New Year shows. Uh-huh. And the sound we had was absolutely fantastic. And
good.
And Ronnie says, I think we should go for these chanters. So Ronnie had made up his mind that we were going for the chanters, but then he resigned from the pipe major job in January 72, and the following week, I got the job. And we kept that set of Warnocks. Now we played that set of Warnocks for the 72 season and the 73 season.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew Warnock he said, I've got a new chanter coming out, do you want to try that one? So we said, aye, okay, we'll try that one. But I didn't think that one was quite as good as the first batch we had.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Aye.
Yeah. Sometimes you can go back instead of going forward.
It was just, in fact, it was a step back because in 1974 we didn't really have all that great a season. And it was mainly because we were struggling to get the sound we were looking for.
Aye.
And then the following season, it was the amalgamation.
From Glasgow Police into Strathclyde Police, with the associated police forces in Strathclyde.
Well, you had the likes of the Lanarkshire and the Renfrew Butte.
Mm-hmm.
And we all amalgamated together. But as you know, in these days, they all had to be serving police officers.
That's right.
So there was very few of the members in these bands actually serving police officers. And at the end of the day, I think there was only 5 personnel actually came and joined the Strathclyde Police. But what we did get was a set of Sinklers that came from the Lanarkshire Police. And that was a set that had been made probably around about 1972. And they came from the same batch that the Shots had got.
Okay.
They were out of the same batch of chanters.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I put them in, I said, oh, here, we've got something here.
Aye.
This is something else. This is a different sound again.
Aye, aye.
And it took me a wee while for my ears to get used to them, but once I was really used to them, I said, this is the direction we're going now, sort of thing. You know?
Reeds, whose reeds were you using?
And these, at that time, we were starting to go on to the McAllister reed.
Uh-huh.
And the McAllister reed was just coming on the market at that time.
Okay.
And I went and I saw Tom McAllister, who was Tom was very amenable type of guy. You know, you could ask him anything and he would tell you.
Uh-huh.
And he was saying, well, he says, we've got these new reeds on the market. He says, do you fancy trying them? So I says, aye. He said, I'll go with you, I'll try them. And it made a big, big difference. Aye. Because although initially when you got them, they were really, really strong reeds to blow.
There's a few hernias in the go.
Geez, I can tell you, there's a few guys moaning when we put these reeds in. They said, where the hell did you get these things from? But we persisted and worked away with them, and eventually we got used to them, and you know, you learned how to handle a reed and how to get the best out of it and what to do it to make it easier, make it more amenable to blowing, and eventually we just stuck with the McAllister, and we stayed with McAllister reeds right through my whole term as pipe major from then on.
Amazing, eh?
Never used anybody else's reeds.
Long number of years, eh?
Aye. But I know before that we used various reed makers. There was a wee guy called Colin Turner who came from about Motherwell area. We used his reeds for quite a while, but he went away down to Southampton. And then when I went to Warnock's at first, Andrew Warnock's father, old Joe Warnock, he made reeds, and he made good reeds. So we used his reeds for maybe a couple of seasons.
Aye.
And then, as I said, we went on to the McAllister reeds, and then never changed after that.
Did you have to shut off drone reeds when you were blowing them in initially?
We did do. Aye. We used to march up and down the hall with no drones going at all.
Right.
Just to get them.
Would you
vibrating.
aim to do that in the dead of winter in order to prepare these reeds for the forthcoming season, or what?
What we normally did, round about January, I would go to McAllister and get 4 dozen reeds, and we would issue one to everybody, and he says, right, we'll work away at blowing this reed in. And it sometimes took maybe 4 weeks to blow that reed in, maybe even longer. And once that reed had been blown in, it was put in the jar. and the next one would go in, and another blowing in process again. And then what would happen was, in these days we had mini bands, quartets, mini bands, and we played in them all.
Right.
You know, they don't seem to have these competitions nowadays, but they did have them in these days. So the one that we were blowing in, that would get used in the mini band competitions.
Okay.
Now, if that reed was still holding up, that would see us right into the start of the season.
Okay.
And if anybody was having problems with a reed, we would fall back to the original one.
Okay.
And it was just, that's the way we worked. We always had a couple of reeds to work with.
Yeah. So you'd reeds on standby.
Aye, we always had reeds on standby. You weren't in the middle of a season, you were asking somebody to blow in a new reed, because it was just an impossible task, really.
Just a quick mention about drone reeds. I take it you didn't have a lot of trouble with drone reeds at that?
No, for most of the time that I can remember, I used McCrosty drone reeds.
Okay.
And he came from Leith, the guy. And I used I would say probably the whole of my term as pipe major, we used McCrosty reeds, except for one season when I used Jock McAllister's drone reeds. And not saying anything against Jock, but that set these reeds he gave us for that, we tried them and they worked, and I went back to him and tried the next lot, didn't work. So I went back to the McCrosties again.
Because it's you knew exactly what you were working with. Unfortunately, I'm going to backtrack back again and talk about the band again. So we had the band going in cycles from a relative high in the mid-60s and maybe taking a bit of a dip in the late 60s, and it took a wee while to build the band back up again when you became pipe major. Is that a fair comment?
Aye, but it's the first
I'm talking
year,
about relative speaking now.
Well, the first year I had it in 72 was, I would probably describe as a pretty mediocre season. We were kind of chapping at the door and maybe getting the odd prize here and there. The following year, 73, actually, we did actually quite well. We never won any major champions that year, but we were second quite a lot in the majors, Worlds being one of them.
Aye.
And then, as I probably told you already, we had changed. We were in one set of walnut chanters and changed to a new set.
Aye, so
and 74 was actually a backward step as far as I was concerned, because we weren't maintaining. The momentum was lost and we went back a wee bit.
But having said that, your personnel were pretty steady at that point.
Personnel at that point were pretty much the same.
Yeah, so they would be improving.
Aye.
Maybe a tone to it, but away in the background, these guys
the integration was improving.
Aye,
and so far as the playing together was concerned.
You'd be coaching them as pipe major, and their music, general approach to music would be improving. So that was all contributing towards a nice build-up for the mid-70s, is that correct?
Aye, that's right, aye. It was 75, as I said, we went on to the Sinklers. And that probably was a kind of transition, that period.
Okay.
We got the new chanters in, people's ears were gradually, slowly getting used to the sound that was coming off them. And by the time we got into 76, we were starting to get a consistency going.
Okay.
Because week in and week out we were getting that sound all the time.
Right.
And the band, you could hear the confidence in the band start to rise. And by the time 77 came round, we were right up there.
A question here. You've got serving police officers. So you've got to work with the folk you've got. It's not an open market. So it's best use of resources. Some of your pipers are very good. Some others need that wee bit extra, or there maybe not just be ever going to be as good as their top guys.
Aye.
So how do you overcome that, and how do you fit them into the band? Tell me about that.
Well, the way I worked on the weaker players was that I used to take them on a one-to-one basis and work away with them. Well, you know, you understand that the police, when you get the end of the year type of December comes in, everybody's in extended hours and all this kind of stuff. And guys are on day and extra Christmas duties. So December was dead. It was a no-no. So as soon as we got December out the road, I just said, right, beginning of January, I used to put a list up. I wrote, and these are the guys that are coming to see me on a one-to-one basis. And I worked away with these guys. And then what I would do then, I would get a strong player and the weak player, and I would have the two of them together with me.
Okay.
Building it up.
Aye.
I would have two, and then I would build it up to 4, and then 6, and then obviously once you go to that, it's just going into a full band practice after
Absolutely,
that.
yeah.
But that was the basis I used to work on, just to get everything, the integration and the accuracy of playing. And it wasn't just done on practice chanters, it was done in pipes as well.
Right.
When the band unit was formed in '79, that added to the whole thing as well, because it then gave me carte blanche as such to work the practices to suit the competitions.
Okay, just to explain to the listener there, prior to the band unit in '79, the band members were farmed out to 2 or 3 per division in Strathclyde, and particularly Glasgow, and this was quite good in terms of the division not being depleted at band practice. There's only 1 or 2 players away out of division to a band practice, but it was not conducive to good band practices because folk weren't there together cohesively the way they would be in the unit. You want to speak about that?
Well, the whole thing actually came to a head early in 1979 because the Strathclyde police were proposing to have an international police tattoo that year. And they had a meeting of all the heads of departments in police headquarters, probably January '79. And after the meeting was over, we were having coffee and the chief came over, the chief constable, who at that time was Pat Hamill, and he came over to me and he says, "Pipe Major, how's the band going?" I says, well, we're going not bad as a band really, but we could be a lot better. And he says, "What do you mean you could be a lot better?" I says, well, the circumstances are at the moment, as you probably know, the average is about 3 guys per division. I said, but when we have a practice, he says, they're not all there because divisions are not releasing the men because they need them to hang over because of some whatever things that they want them to do, so they're not turning up at practices. So the chief said, well, I want you to get your head together with Chief Superintendent Fraser, who was in charge of community involvement branch at that time, and I want a full report on the band circumstances on my desk within a week. So this Chief Superintendent Fraser grabs a hold of me and says, "What the hell have you been saying to him?" I says, well, he asked me a question and I told the man the truth.
Aye.
He says, well, you and I better get our heads together because he's looking for this report within a week, which is not very long.
Aye.
So him and I got our heads together and we cobbled up this thing to go in front of the chief. And about a month later I was out in the street and I get this radio call, "You have to report to the Chief Constable's office right away." So away I goes away up to the chief. And as soon as I went in the door, I take the hat off and get the coffee in. So I said, "Oh, we're all right, something must be good because you get the coffee in."
Aye.
So him and Alec, remember Alec Morrison, who
Yes.
was the assistant, or deputy?
He was
the
all
deputy.
right, actually.
Aye. So there was him and the chief and myself, and Angus Maclellan was along with me, so he was there as well. So we're sitting and the chief says, well, he says, what I propose to do, he says, is get all the band members together and have a separate band unit as such. He says, just like the horse branch, like the dog branch, he says, and you'll all operate from within A division.
Okay.
He says, but you won't be in A division in strength, you'll be additional to their strength, and you'll have headquarters numbers, and you'll come under the umbrella of the community involvement branch.
At headquarters.
I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this sounds pretty good, this. So he says, what do you think of it? I said, I think it sounds pretty good to me. I said, well, we'll need to get the rest of the band together, because some of these guys, although they're in their different divisions, he says, they've all got their wee niches, and some guys have got good jobs that they want to hold on to, and maybe not be too keen to come to A division. He says, we'll have to have a discussion on that. He says, right, he says, I'll set up a meeting in police headquarters here for the whole band members within a week.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about the beginning of March, and I'm thinking, God, I hope this thing will continue, because the season's no far away, it's keeping on.
Aye.
So we have the meeting, and everybody's 100% behind it. I think there was one or two wee grumbles. Oh, I don't
There's always grumbles.
No, but everybody would seem to be quite happy about the thing. And before March was out, the band unit was formed, and we were in A division.
Great.
And that's how it all started from there. And it was it had its, as you know, it had its own promotion structure within it,
Yes.
and it made a big difference, because we were all working from the one office. You didn't have to go looking for people, and you said, right, you come with me because you're not playing these tunes as well as you should be playing. And I just grabbed them, and away I went, took them away.
Great.
It was a great idea, and it was very, very successful.
Extremely successful.
And I mean, I was over the moon. I couldn't be happier. And I was very, very lucky that the chief constables that came after Pat Hamill, they were
supportive.
Very supportive as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And not only the chief constables, but the guys that were the regional conveners these days, was the Jimmy Burns and Jennings and Sanderson, I think, came after him. They were all very, very supportive of the band as well. If the band was doing well, they were happy.
Aye. The interviewee this evening for you is Ian Maclellan, well known throughout the piping world, solo piper, pipe major, judge, and various other things, who has, I'm quite sure, interesting views in all matters relating to piping and other matters as well, if we get round to it. So, without any further ado, I'm going to ask Ian a question. Ian, could you start the ball rolling, please, by telling us about your early life in piping? When did it commence? Who's your first teacher, and what kind of guy was he? Who did he learn from? That sort of stuff.
It all really started probably about 1946, when I was down in a farm in a place called Shandon, down past Helensburgh, where we were evacuated to after the Clydebank Blitz. And my father had worked in the Blackburn Aircraft Company at that time in Dumbarton, and he had a colleague called Alec Ibell, who was maybe not well known to everybody, but well known to the piping fraternity as a very good teacher. So he volunteered one day to cycle from White Inch in Glasgow down to the farm at Shandon, and he brought with him a practice chanter and a Logan Stewart book.
Good.
And that was me on the road.
Uh-huh.
And the following year, we moved back to Clydebank, where we were allocated a new house, and from there on in, I used to go to Alec Ibell's house every Thursday for a lesson on the practice chanter. And after about a year with him, I was on the pipes, and eventually...
What age would you be then, Ian?
Well, I started
Roughly.
actually, 1946 I started, I was 9.
Okay.
9 years of age. And we come back the following year, 47, so I was 10 then, and I went to Alec, Ibel, for about 2 years. And he persuaded me to join the 214 Boys Brigade, which was based in Whiteinch.
When was the first time you won the World Championship?
First time we won it was 1976,
Okay.
which was at Hoyk,
Right.
and it actually coincided with we also had an international police tattoo in Kelvin Hall in Glasgow that year as well.
Uh-huh.
And I can always remember after we had finished playing in the competition, we actually had to come back up the road because we were due to perform that evening in the police tattoo. So we left George Seymour behind
Okay.
to get any prize that we were going to get.
Uh-huh.
And we proceeded back to Glasgow, and we were actually the first item on in the tattoo, and we played in the tattoo, come off, and there was no word, nobody knew anything. Well, they probably knew, but they wanted to keep it a secret from us until the band went on to play to open the second half.
Uh-huh.
And when the band finished after opening the second half of the tattoo, as we were marching out, all the Danish police guys were there,
Uh-huh.
from the Danish police orchestra.
Right.
And they were all standing in a line, and they guys had these skipped hats with the white tops on them, just like the traffic cops used to have.
Okay.
And they're standing and they're cheering like mad with it. We're all going, what the hell are they all cheering up? And then the penny dropped. All of them. And it was then that was the first time we knew we'd actually won the World Pipe Band Championship.
There were a wee shandy that night.
By James, I'll tell you, this house was jumping. After it was, when we went on for the finale, it was then announced to the audience that the band had won the World Pipe Band Championship that day. And after we came off, the chief came over and congratulated all the guys, and he says, we're having a wee party up in the suite, the Kelvin Hall suite.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He says, I want to invite you all up. And I'm saying, he said, don't keep them too long. I'm having a party in my house. He says, don't you worry. He says, I'll not keep them too long. So, I think I had the whole bloody Danish orchestra in here that night.
Oh, it's amazing, eh?
And the following night, the tattoo was on the following night, and that was it, finished after that. And we went in the following night, and the first person I bumped into was the chief, David McNee, and he says to me, he says, there was a hell of a stushy up in your area last night, he says. I says, what do you mean? He says, well, I heard there's been a lot of phone calls of people complaining about a noise coming from 23 Glendale Avenue for the neighbours. I says, well, it wasn't any of my neighbours, I says, because all my neighbours were in my house.
Very good. So that was a tremendous first for you, and it's the first prize, if you like, in the Worlds for the police band for many, many a year, since before the war.
25 years it was.
Aye.
25 years, because the previous time they had won it was in 1951 at Murrayfield under John MacDonald.
Aye, my goodness. Aye. Different days again.
Aye.
Were you on a roll after that, 76? Or
Well,
what happened?
76, 77 actually, I think we won every major championship 77 except the Worlds, and we were second to the Dysart. And the following year, 78, the same thing happened again.
Okay.
We were second in the Worlds. And then in 79, we won the Worlds again, and I think the only major championship we didn't win that year was the Scottish. And then in 1980, the Shots won the Worlds and we were second again. And then 81, that's when we went on a roll after that. You know, that's when it was 6 in a row
Aye.
thing.
And then the 78th, Fraser Hellman.
They won it in 87.
87, sorry.
87 they won it, and then we won it the next 4 years again after that.
Great. And you had a particular preparation for the Worlds, didn't you? Yeah, leading up to it.
Well, we did. In fact, most years from the lead up to the Worlds, we rehearsed. We rehearsed every day in the week, actually. And that was one of the facilities you had because you were a band unit as such. You know, unless there was anything else on where you had to be there. I mean, the chief gave you that
it was halcyon
facility.
days, eh?
It was halcyon days, really. In fact, I think once or twice we actually had to go to Tullyallen and play, which wasn't a bad thing because when you were there you could actually
do your stuff
and have a practice as well.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of times we had to do that. Well, actually, police you know how they used to have that tattoo parade every year through the city centre. They advertised the Edinburgh tattoo. We used to have police that every year. So, I mean, but we always fitted. We could always fit in the practices to suit all these different duties that were going on.
But all the people were carrying the skills that right through the 70s into the 80s, and it was quite a steady band you had, wasn't it?
It was actually right up until...
In terms of personalities and stuff.
Personnel-wise, it was practically the same band right up until 87.
Okay.
And then there was people left and we didn't really have anybody to put in their place. So 87 was, as far as number-wise was concerned, was probably about our lowest year. Because I think in 87 I only had 11 pipers, that was it.
My goodness.
11 pipers, and I think we had 4 sides, 2 tenors and a bass, and that was it.
Now the average band, again for a listener who's used to looking at 20 odd pipers these days, the average band would be what, a dozen, 14 pipers maybe?
Well, in grade 1 it was around about 12, 13, 14 pipers. Some bands, shots now and again used to turn out to about 16, but the average band was about, I mean, most of the time that I was pipe major, I think 13 was my number.
Aye. In terms of clarity, it'd be terrific as well. Much more manageable as well.
Oh, God, I don't know how they managed to set up 20 pipers nowadays. You know, the guys must be tearing their hair out.
25, no less. I mean, what's that about?
At the end of most years, the chief would always have us up in a wee discussion about the band and how things were going. And in 87, it was Andrew Sloan had taken over as chief constable by that time, and he had us up in his office for the usual wee chat we had now and again, and he was asking, he said, are we having any problems? I said, well, the main problem we're having now, I said, we don't have the personnel. I said, we're getting quite low in personnel. He says, well, there's any way we can fix that? I says, well, I know serving police officers in Strathclyde Police. They're not playing for the Strathclyde Police Pipe Band, they're playing for the other grade 1 bands. And Andrew Sloan looked at me in that kind of aghast expression. He meant to tell me that serving police officers not playing for my band. And he says, that's the case, sir. He says, well, I want to know who these people are. I had a wee bit of paper and said, there's 5 names there. So, John Wilson, Jimmy Watt, Jim Maclellan and myself, we're off to Japan.
Right.
To do a wee tour in Japan for 3 weeks in Japan. I comes back and I discover I've got 5 new members in my band. And I think the Chief Constable gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. So that kind of, actually it worked out that we had four new pipers and one drummer.
Okay.
And that kind of brought us back up to a reasonable strength again, and that got us going. And the following year we were back on the rails again and playing really well.
Good.
And managed to
Get
win the Worlds for the next 4 years after that.
Aye. And you were winning all sorts of other prizes as well.
Aye.
During all this time, of course, the band is extremely busy over all these decades with engagements.
Aye.
You had a lot of engagements abroad and at home. Are there any particular stories strike you or come to mind at this time?
Well, I suppose there's a few stories, but I can't always remember them when somebody asks you. But there's one story that I can remember was the band was over for Expo 86 over in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And they met up with for a night with the Simon Fraser University guys. So Graham Richardson, as you know, is nicknamed as the Prophet of Doom.
Aye.
So apparently some of the Simon Fraser guys were kidding Graham on about this. I see, we hear you're called the Prophet of Doom, and Graham says, yes, that's what they call me, he says. And I prophesied doom for you guys, because when you come over to play in the World's Championship, you'll be drawn first. And lo and behold, when they came over in August, they were drawn first to appear in the World's Pipe Band Championship. So Graham says, they'll be thinking there's some un-American activities going on here. He says, they'll be after my blood. So that was one of the stories, but afterwards...
He was a funny man, Graham.
Aye. Well, that's one thing about him.
Aye. And you still the likes of him and Angus Laurie and various other old worthies playing with the band. And Angus, he made a few tunes over the years. He did,
I composed quite a lot of tunes. In fact, over the years, we probably used quite a lot of his tunes, and Jimmy Work's
was
compositions as well,
yep.
And the band medleys.
Uh-huh.
We used quite a few of their tunes over the years.
Yeah.
Very successfully too, I may add.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're asking about stories here, I can remember another one about Graham and Angus Laurie when we were over playing at the in the CNE and Ontario in Toronto. There's a bridge next to the Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And that bridge takes you from Canada into America.
Right.
So Graham and Angus decide that they'll go for a wee stroll across this bridge, not knowing that they're going over the border.
Right.
And they've not got any identification, there's no passports, no nothing. So they get to the other side of this bridge, and the big guy, the big American immigration guy says, whoa, where are you guys going? He says, oh, we're just out for a stroll. So he says to Graham, he says, where are you from? Graham says, I'm from Skye. The guy thought, oh, here, we've got a right one here. So there's a bit of to and fro, and then eventually the guy says, well, I think you better be back on the other side of that bridge. So he gives him this chitty to get them back into Canada again.
Okay.
So they get halfway across, and Angus says to Graham, you got that chitty, Graham? Graham says, I've not got a chitty. And you have, she says, you've got the chitty. And he says, no, you've got the chitty. And by the time they get to the other side, I don't think anyone knew who had the chitty, but they managed to persuade their way back into Canada again.
To get off the bridge, aye. Oh, a pair of characters. You'd have a lot of fun in the band too, and a lot of pleasantries. And the social life would be good as well, eh?
Oh, aye, we got a lot of good, as you say, when you're the band's away, you get a lot of good laughs. Good banter.
Tell me something, away from the band for a minute. You were a very good player, always. And I remember listening to you way back even in the 60s. And you became very successful with the solo piping.
Aye.
Could you tell us something about that?
Well, solo-wise, I never really competed seriously until about 1964.
Okay.
And it was Ronald Laurie that encouraged me to go into the solo scene more seriously, because I just kind of dabbled in it before that. Did a bit in the army when I just in army competitions, but going round the games and playing in the boards, but here it wasn't until about 64 that I started to go round the games with Ronald Laurie and Angus Maclellan.
Okay.
And I started then, and 64 I was getting the odd prize in competitions here and there, and 65 I went for the first time to the Argyllshire Garden at Oban, and won the marches that day. In fact, I was on first, and it was absolutely looked like coming down in buckets. And in these days, when all the piping competitions except the Peterborough were held up in the Games Park.
Okay.
And you had to, you had 76 marches, which they still do now, but you had to play it twice through. And I can always remember going up there and saying, well, it's bucket and rain, I'm on first. I might as well just go on with it. And pipes were going well, so I just played the march twice through, never thought anything of it.
Can you remember what you played?
I played Brigadier General Cheap.
Total one.
And I was wandering round the park, must have been about lunchtime, and Andy, I bumped into Andy Wright, and he says, he says, you done well today. I says, what's it, are the prizes out? He says, you've won the mark competition. You could have blew me down with a feather. I said,
terrific.
So that was that, and then I said, kind of started there, and in fact, talking about Oban, the same day in the Strathclyde reel competition, John Wilson, who was only a young lad, about 17, won the Strathclyde reel competition.
My goodness, sir.
And then went to Inverness that year, did no bad, I never won any. I got second in the Strathclyde reel, I got second in the jig competition at Inverness. Then the following year, I was getting in the prizes. Where I was really doing well was the likes of Hughes and Barra.
Okay.
I did well in the Hughes and Barra because I won the march and the Strathclyde reel and the jig at Hughes and Barra in the 1 year.
Hughes and Barra was at that time Glasgow High School?
Aye, Glasgow High School, aye.
Correct.
And I was, nearly every year I was always pretty successful in the Hughes and Barra and the Scottish Pipers. I was always quite successful there, and then they started the Eagle Pipers competition. And the Edinburgh City Police started holding crullers, and they were all winter competitions, and I always did pretty well in them.
Okay.
In fact, won them a few times. And then it wasn't till '68 I won the former winners at Oban, and then in '70 I won the marches at Inverness. '71 I won the former runners, and I was always getting in the prizes. I was always doing pretty well. And then about a couple of years after I took over the band, I had said, I've done enough in the solo, so I'll concentrate in the band now and start trying to get hit back on the rails. And probably about 1975 was about the last time I really competed solo.
But you had a very successful
spell
at it.
I had a good run in the solos.
let's talk tempos for a second. Tempos of the band and tempos of solo piping quite different.
Aye.
Gives you a view in that.
Well, I probably, if I think back now, probably when I started in the solos, the marches were played a bit more brisk than you hear them played nowadays.
Okay.
And it was the same in the pipe bands. I mean, the pipe bands used to really hammer the tempos right up the park, especially with the marches.
Yeah.
But round about the time that Bob Hardy took over, in fact, even when Jackie Smith was a pipe major in the Muirheads, which would be probably about the middle 60s, the tempo started to come back a wee bit. Not just as, but it was most noticeable that this was a Muirhead setting this trend, because the other bands were still
playing fast,
playing quite quick, and then all of a sudden the Muirheads were starting to become really very successful.
Okay.
So everybody was saying, well, that's the band that's successful.
Yeah.
We'll start.
What the judges looking for.
So everybody else started to bring the tempos back that bit.
Okay.
And it was probably maybe even round about the same time that the tempos and the solos started to come down a wee bit as well.
Aye.
But that would be middle 60s, the late 60s. But before that, it was always really well up tempo.
Now you judge both bands and solos.
Aye.
And there's still a noticeable difference, one would say, in the tempos of marches vis-a-vis bands and solo piping.
I think the solo-wise, I feel that the tempos are just a wee bit the slow side. They don't, to my mind, they're not creating any excitement in their playing.
Right.
They're playing their cards close.
Safe all the
playing their cards close to their chest. Don't make a mistake. Have a nice bagpipe.
Aye.
Good execution.
Just get through the tune.
Get through the tune.
Aye.
But to my mind, if a guy comes up and he's full of music, nice bagpipe, and you're getting a wee bit of flow in the tune, and that's number one for me.
And what about the over-pointing or playing round? What is the style that you prefer, or how would you like it?
I don't like this round style of playing.
Okay.
No, that doesn't do an awful lot for me. I like nice phrasing, but at the same time, the tune's got to flow.
Okay.
But you can get over-pointing, to my mind, which makes a tune sound very square, and you play bar by bar. They don't link up. They don't link the bars up. The tunes as they flow along. And I like to hear it well expressed, but flowing at the same time.
Okay. I'd like to know your views, if they're impertinent, anything different or to add about Strathspey playing.
Well, I mean, if you're playing a march Strathspey and reel, so far as tempo-wise, your Strathspey must be sympathetic to the tempo that you've played the march, because if you go up and go down, you knock the whole balance of the thing out anyway. But okay, you'll get separate Strathspey and reel competition as such. But I like that, and I like to hear a good rhythmic, strong, weak, medium weak accent coming through in the Strathspeys to give it that nice lift.
And could you maybe even hum or something, a bar, just to explain that?
I like to, if you think of the You Were a Cook On.
Okay.
To give an example.
Fine, yeah.
Hum 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 the brim brim braid the hum bro.
Yeah, excellent.
You know, you've got a nice strong medium beat, but at the same time the tunes.
Yeah, and then you would flow into a reel from that.
Aye.
And you like the pointed reels, not the round reels.
Well, some reels you actually can get away with slightly if you just kind of round it off ever so slightly.
So it's a sheep wife. How would you like? Because there's two distinct styles of playing.
Well, there is, but I like the sheep and hurry humbody dee dee barabby hara humbody humbody dee hey darabby hara. But it's, you hear some people say hurry dumbody dee hey dee hara humbody humbody dee hey harabby hara hara. I don't particularly like it so much in that tune. But you might, you'll hear wee Gordon Walker and he'll play John Morrison.
I was just thinking about that, John Morrison, yeah.
Gordon kind of rounds it off slightly. Not completely.
No.
No, but he rounds it.
And he seems to change his style depending what part he's playing.
Well, you get the other guy come along going,
aye.
both are good to my mind because that tune can lend itself to be rounded off slightly, but not too much.
So you're taking a lot of these reels on a tune-by-tune basis, really.
Aye.
You've been judging for a long number of years now by virtue of your success in the solo circuit earlier in your life and your judging bands for your obvious success with the Strathclyde Police Pipe Band. What do you enjoy, the band or the solo judging?
I find the solo judging actually easier.
Well, it's sitting down for a start.
Well, correct. It's more relaxed, I find, whereas insofar as the pipe bands are concerned, you're on your feet and the whole time that band's performing, you're writing.
Of course.
Now, you've got to split your brain down the middle.
Aye.
In fact, sometimes into four, because you're trying to write, and you're trying to listen to what the band's doing, and you're trying to put a comment on a sheet.
What they've done.
Which is actually quite a hard task.
Of course it is.
Because you can be concentrating when you're, and you don't always pick up what's actually happening there.
Aye. And maybe
And you
somebody's
can maybe
hand
miss-
off a chant or a wee bit of false stuff going on.
well, this is it. You don't.
Aye, the other side of the circle.
There's things happening technically,
Yeah.
which you don't really hear, but visually you could see it.
Yeah.
But you're not looking at them all the time. You're down here right away.
It's difficult.
Whereas in a solo performance, you're sitting there and you're sitting like that, and you're fully concentrating on what that guy's playing.
And it's only one guy you've got to listen
Aye.
to.
You're not thinking about writing things down. Okay, at the end of his performance, you write a few wee things down about the performance, which you don't write down what he's good at. You write down the bits that are upsetting, whatever it is.
Aye.
Whereas in the bands, you're writing all the time.
Aye, you've got to be a wee bit diplomatic because they're reading it.
Well, this is, you can't say this is a heap of, you know what.
During all this, Ian, in 1982, you were awarded the BEM.
That's correct, aye.
Do you want to tell me something about that, please?
Well, that actually came as a big surprise, because I would never expect anything like that, especially, I mean, the band was just kind of starting on its roll before really anything ever had really happened. And to get that at that point in my career was just mind-blowing. And it was Pat Hamlet put me up for it, along with Jimmy Burns, who was the regional convener at that time. And I can always remember Pat Hamill phoning me up about the time I was due to get presented with the medal. And he said to me, he says, "You've got two choices here." He says, "You can go down to Dumbarton, the Borough Chambers at Dumbarton, get your medal presented by the Lord Lieutenant of the county." He said, "You'll be the only one that's there, along with all your friends at the pipe band and your family." He said, "And that'll be your day." And he says, "You can go down the road," he says, "and be among thousands."
Aye.
He says, "Where do you want to go?" I says, "I'm going to Dumbarton."
Aye, good. That'd be a nice day too.
That was great, because I mean, me and 2 kids, and that's other people in my family, plus quite a lot of the guys in the pipe band.
That's smashing.
And it was like a civic reception, really.
Aye. That's really
Brigadier
nice,
General Pearson, he was the guy that presented me. In fact, there's a photograph of it up there.
Aye. Jolly
You
chap.
can't see it here,
Aye,
to work, but it's up there.
Aye.
And that's where I went down to Martin got it.
That was
that.
yeah. That's an achievement. There's not too many folk in the piping world get letters after their name.
No, it's usually BUM or something.
Aye. Well, you've had a very, very successful life in the piping. We've discussed your early life. We've discussed the other bands, Strathclyde Police Pipe Band, your solo piping, and your judging, which you've been at for almost 20 years, in another couple of years' time, when you think that, after you left the band. And so you've enjoyed your time in the piping.
Oh, God, aye. And still a lot to enjoy yet, I hope.
Aye, absolutely. Well, Ian, thanks very much for your time this evening.
Aye,
and I hope that the future viewers enjoy what you've told them and they pick up something useful for their own piping lives. Thanks very much, Ian.
Thank you.